Good evening. Good evening, and welcome to JW3 for this, the 7th Annual Spiro Lecture. A particular warm welcome to our special guests, Robin and Nitsa Spiro, of course, and their yes. I think we'll probably be in for quite a lot of that tonight. And their family and many friends who are here this evening. My name is Rachel Grunwald, and I am proud to be the Director of Programming at this wonderful institution, London's Jewish Community Centre. I must confess that I am here as a late stand-in for our CEO, Reichman Simonson, who's unfortunately been homesick all week and is hugely frustrated to be missing this. He sent me his welcome speech and asked me to read it out on his behalf and to send you, Robin and Nitsa, his sincere apologies. I also have sincere apologies from Sir Trevor Pears, Executive Chair of Pears Foundation, whose idea it was to set up this annual tribute lecture in honour of the Spiros, and whose generosity it is in sponsoring the series for 10 years. Like Raymond, he would never usually miss this event, and he sends his warmest regards to you, Robin and Nitsa, and his humble apologies for his absence. In my role as Director of Programming, I don't often stand on this stage or even attend many of the thousands of events that we run every night. But tonight is no ordinary event, as we are honouring a couple who can be described as anything but ordinary. Whilst we're disappointed that Reichman cannot be here to read his words in person, it's my honour to be here to pay tribute to the Spiros on this auspicious occasion. With your permission then, I'd like to read out Reichman's welcome words on his behalf. As many of you in the audience will know, every year at JW3 we put on over 6,000 events, classes, talks, performances and activities. But only one event in our calendar has the unique claim to be an annual event named in honour of living legends. And those legends are, of course, Nitsa and Robin Spiro. Nitsa and Robin, through the creation, first of the Spiro Institute for the Study of Jewish History and Culture, followed by the Spiro Arc, have been leading innovators in Jewish cultural, history and Hebrew language education for over 40 years. As that's Raymond, have often said publicly, they've long been true chalutzim, pioneers in the community, and have inspired many thousands of students from every corner of the Jewish community, as well as non-Jews from all over the country. The Spiro's cultural and educational programs have a justified reputation for being of exceptional quality, offering Jewish history, culture, music, theatre, and innovative teaching of Hebrew, all complemented with cultural and historical tours and heritage trails. Since the late 1970s, when Robin had his vision while studying in Oxford for a postgraduate degree in modern Jewish studies, he and Nitsa blazed a trail in the British Jewish community that created the fertile ground that eventually enabled the establishment of JW3 as the UK's first JCC of its kind. Without their pioneering work, we don't believe the community would have been ready to embrace the idea of a JW3 in quite the same way it has in just the 6 short years since we opened our doors. And we owe them more than that. The LJCC, which became part of JW3 following our merger in 2015, grew directly out of the Spiro Institute, founded and run by Robin and Nitsa for 20 years before their creation of the Spiro Arc. They chose the name Spiro Arc for their newly formed entity because of the dual meaning in Jewish culture and history for the term Ark. Firstly, the Ark of the Covenant, which reflects our bond to our history, shared by all Jewish people and to the values which unite us. Secondly, the Ark also refers to Noah's Ark, a symbol of physical survival. Our history teaches us that in every generation we're subject to threats symbolized by the deluge. Yet for millennia we have survived as a people. Through Robin's and Nitsa's various projects and institutions over the decades, their visionary ideas have inspired many thousands of people, Jews and non-Jews alike. Like the dual meaning of the term Ark, they have connected many thousands of people to Jewish history, values and culture, ensuring the continued survival and thriving of the Jewish community. And somehow, despite being possibly the hardest working people in the Jewish community, they even managed to find time to create a truly wonderful family of 8 children and 14 grandchildren. 16 grandchildren. Well, that's entirely Raymond's mistake. Who each carries a similar sense of responsibility to improve the world around them, emulating Nitsa and Robin's example. It's wonderful to see many of them here this evening. Robin and Nitza, I am delighted, and I speak for myself as well as Raymond, that you are back here again this evening for the annual tribute lecture to honour your unique contribution to the British Jewish community and the Jewish people, something absolutely worth celebrating. And Robin, we would especially like to wish you a very happy birthday as you are about to enter your 90th year. Mazel tov. And so on to this evening's lecture. Thank you for your patience. With this year's guest speaker, Professor Uriel Reichman, who has flown in from Israel especially to be with us. It's my genuine honour to welcome Professor Reichman to JW3 to give the 7th annual Spiro lecture sponsored by Pears Foundation. Much like Robin and Nitza, Professor Reichman is another one of the Chalutzim, pioneers we have with us this evening, having also founded important educational institutions. Firstly, in 1990, he founded the Ramot Mishpat Law School, the first private college of its kind in Israel not subsidized by the government. He led the school until 1995, when he went on to create and lead the Interdisciplinary Center, IDC, Herzliya, the first non-profit private institution of higher education in Israel. He has served as its president from its establishment to date, which is a remarkable achievement. Professor Reichman served in the paratroopers of the Israel Defense Forces from 1960 to 1963, earning the rank of lieutenant. As a commander in the IDF reserves, he fought in the Six-Day War, War of Attrition, and Yom Kippur War. After his brother Gad fell in battle in the Yom Kippur War, he was transferred to a non-combat unit and served as the president of a military land tribunal with the rank of major. He received both LLB and LLM degrees with honors from the Faculty of Law at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem and earned his doctoral degree in law at the University of Chicago Law School. From 1985 to 1990, he served as the Dean of the Faculty of Law at Tel Aviv University, which served him well for his roles in establishing and leading the educational institutions that he has over the subsequent 3 decades. Robin and Nitza, dear friends, without further ado, please give a very warm welcome to Professor Uriel Reichman.
Knowledge, we said 25 years ago when we have founded IDC, should not be stored in disciplinary silos. We have ever since introduced interdisciplinary education, which is based on rigorous teaching of at least 2 social sciences disciplines. Today, we clearly need a new approach to interdisciplinary education. The technological and the scientific revolution requires us to redesign the academic structure. We have to prepare our students to confront the challenges of the 21st century. The core of our university is about to be based on interdisciplinary technological and science research center.
At the new Innovation Center, I'll be able to work with experts in augmented reality to better represent scenarios for emergency response, with human-computer interaction experts, with brain researchers to understand how the mind and brain works when people make decisions, and of course with data scientists to understand patterns of decision-making over time.
By bringing together researchers and experts from diverse fields of knowledge, unique creativity is likely to be engendered.
Recent developments in computer science opened up what is called the age of learning machines. Computers today do not only follow instructions written by humans, but can learn many tasks by themselves. This allows them to perform more complex tasks more efficiently and effectively. Putting this power to use in many fields creates success. For example, using computer vision for self-driving cars, computational biology for the development of new drugs and treatments, and robotics for human-computer interfaces. Here at IDC, we're working to make such connections between computer science and many other fields to develop creative and innovative solutions for real-world problems. Our programs aim to educate students for interdisciplinary thinking, which is a fundamental ability for the future.
recent years, the new integration of psychology, neuroscience, and biochemistry has led to innovative insights on how we think, feel, act, and remember. In our lab pioneered research, we were the first to detail the role of the love hormone oxytocin in human attachment and social collaboration. We were among the first to use neuroimaging to study the brain basis of motherhood and fatherhood, and to track the development of the empathic brain from infancy to adult life. Following infants for whom the early bond with mother fails, for instance, when mothers are depressed or children are reared under conditions of war and terror, enables us to develop targeted interventions by which the neurobiology of attachment can foster resilience.
We believe that innovation is human-centered. Before we innovate, we have to understand what the human needs are, and only then we can start the innovation process. In our lab, we try to study how people behave, what people need, and then we take the most advanced technologies and start to create prototypes until we find the solutions that address those needs. This is what the human experience is all about, and this is a new way of creating solutions for people.
Civilization is moving forward. In the entrepreneurial sphere of IDC, we are venturing a major change in our university, a change that will enable us to cope with the changes and bring about better understanding, better research, and better education. Thank you very much of coming to join me this evening. Thank you, Mrs. Grunewald, but two corrections. First, the reason that I'm still the president of the University of IDC University after 26 years is, it's you shouldn't give me the credit. There was nobody to fire me as I'm the president. So it's, and the second thing, this is not a movie, I just a picture I hoped to show you. And therefore I have to come again and show us the right picture. This is by mistake. It wasn't the kind of movie I want to show. We have a short movie, I didn't know why it didn't show, which is about first 25 years of IDC and how we developed. So, next time around. It's usually a sign of seriousness, changing the glasses. I'm here today to pay a tribute to Nitza and Robin Spiro. My good friends sitting here, Malka and Amnon Leon, told me a few months ago about the Spiro's lifetime dedication to Jewish education. Your devotion for over 40 years, dear Nitza and Robin, is remarkable. Doing it on your own, facing real difficulties, keeping on, walking the path you set for yourself in the service of a cause and a people, will set an example for others to follow. From my own experience, I can imagine you have faced days of lonely despair, and then you started anew, not giving up, continuing duty-bound by your self-imposed mission. By touching the lives of so many over the years, you, as only a few of us, have reached your inner calling. I'm grateful to have met you and be with you tonight. Thank you. The topic of my lecture is the dreams and realities of the Zionist revolution. We are forgetting that only recently, I would say in the last quarter of the 19th century, a revolution actually happened among the Jewish people. This revolution didn't come by itself. It needed a few remarkable, outstanding people and courageous people who stood up. Following the French Revolution and the few years later, the French emancipation of the Jews, people started leaving the ghettos. They came with habits of learning, and they stormed the opening, there was the opened world that was waiting for them. Many of them converted. Others started regarding, didn't pay attention to the heritage that they left. Others were involved in fascinating new countries and new nationalities, and they joined those people. After the 1881 pogrom, where 200 communities were destroyed in southern Russia, many left for the States. About 2 million people left, 2 million Jews left for the States. And others thought for salvation in embracing socialistic and the Bundistic ideas that were supposed to change the world and thereby bring salvation to the Jews. It's not a very large group, but still there were Jews that went and studied, left the ghettos and studied. They were successful, but they still regarded themselves as Jewish, although they didn't agree any longer to accept the full observance of the mitzvot, and were not ready to continue to accept the ideas of the rabbis. From that group started a new beginning. One of the most leading and important people of all was Echad Ha'am. Echad Ha'am claimed that he by himself was a Talmid Chacham. He studied, he was a Talmid Chacham, but he felt that the Jews are losing the way. As you know, the immediate response of the ultra-Orthodox community was to close the door. They declared that the Jewish law, the Jewish mitzvot are frozen. There will be no change in the Jewish law. If you know, Khatam Sofer was the one that said Chadash Asur MaTorah, and they closed the door. And people like Echad Ha'am went and said that his claim was that what happened was that Judaism became, according to the rabbis, Am HaSefer, the people of the book, and in his view, it wasn't a compliment. In his view, he said that when the Jews lived on their own land, there was a development, a fascinating development in the laws, in the Jewish laws, and the emphasis on responses to realities. He dealt a lot with the Nevi'im, saying that the Nevi'im were not satisfied with the major traditions of the Jews at the time of just bringing korbanot
to Bet HaMikdash, and sacrifices to Bet HaMikdash. And he pointed out people, Nevi'im like Micha, who said, "Yigid lecha Adam ma tov u'ma Adonai doresh mincha, ki masot mishpat va'avat chesed va'atzna lechet im Elohecha," which means, I can tell you what is good and what the Lord is demanding of you, to do justice and be graceful and be humble when you walk this land before you, Lord. And by speaking about asot mishpat, doing justice, it meant for most is taking care of those who cannot defend themselves, the orphan and the widow, and standing up against people who were powerful and were acting by getting bribery or were fraudulent in their commercial dealings. All of it disappeared, said Achad Ha'am, because the entire laws were, the response to the haskala, to going out and getting the kind of education out of fear, everything was closed. And there was no more development in the Jewish life. And as a matter of law, the matter of thing, what happened was that everything was pushed into the Torah. So the Torah was everything, and everything was the Torah. And what he claimed was that what we lost during what happened, which was a result of the exile, was a loss of nationality. What happened was very interesting. National feelings and national traditions were simply converted into religious rules. To give you an example, the Hebrew language was the language of our forefathers living in Eretz Israel. They wrote in Hebrew, spoke in Hebrew. Now, what happened was that since the Jews were dispersed all over the world and had to make a living and lived in different countries, there was a fear that the Hebrew will be lost. So what they did out of a national, a cultural, very basic element like the language, they entitled it Sfat Kodesh. They make it a holy language, and thereby they simply embraced a national element and made it religious. And so you can say about other things as well. For example, to defend the ethnicity of the Jewish people in the Gola, they were very stringent in the Giyur, and very stringent in the question of, marrying out of faith. It was as if they would sit Shiva and so on and so forth. Actually, most of the holidays, the Jewish holidays, are national holidays. Either they commemorate national glory, like Hanukkah or Purim, or they simply are responses or are traditions of things that happened to the Jewish people. All Shloshet HaRegalim were basically involved. As a Achad Ha'am, they had the smell of the land because it was involved in working the land, bringing the fruit of the land to Bet HaMikdash. And they were actually commemorating the greatest and the most important saga in Jewish history, which was the getting out of Egypt and wandering in the Midbar 40 years, almost like, luckily you are in London, not in the Midbar, but it was an enormous undertaking of wandering and having all this difficult situation to be. So what is actually happening, Achad Ha'am argued, was that everything was becoming religious. Although it was a culture, It was a national elements. So national elements became religious. That happened to remember the past. But at the same time, it was embraced by religion, and the result was that it became part of the religious attitude. And the problem was that as a result of it, what actually happened was that people in the Galut followed what Saadia Gaon said. It's a 10th century rabbi, worked in Iraq, Sura, that said, En umatenu uma ela betorotea, which means we are a nation only within our laws, within the Torah, not out of it. And therefore, you would probably be able to describe it as a virtual country, something that is only in the Torah, but not outside. That instead brought a situation that people like Echad Ha'am and especially Pinsker couldn't accept. The ability or the fact that the Jews for centuries didn't take activities, didn't take action to try to change the reality of their life. And they were haunted by all the pogroms and so on and so forth. In 1881, as I've mentioned, a large pogrom is taking place in South Russia. And it was, people were slaughtered, and property was lost, 200 communities. But there was also a feeling of shame. Bialik wrote about it, that the Jews were hiding and saw their women and wives and daughters being raped, and they didn't do anything. And that, again, was another element that was stirring the feeling of nationality, the need to do something. Pinsker was major power in the change of attitude within the Jewish community. He described the situation of the nation as follows. He said, the ghost of the Jewish people, which lacks unity and organization, which has no land or any other ties to unify, and which is no longer alive, still walks as a ghost among the living. That is the situation as he saw it. Pinsker felt that the destruction of the Jewish state had deeply influenced the Jews' political thinking, but the warning of the national spirit that followed it constituted an even greater danger. If during the periods of persecution and suffering, the Jews had not clearly seen how they could revive the nationalism, it was because the drive for freedom and sovereignty within them had been undermined or had disappeared altogether. That was Pinsker. And while emancipation was the idea of letting the Jews become part of other nations, enabling to become part of it, Pinsker argued that the Jews don't need an emancipation. What they need is auto-emancipation, emancipating themselves, taking their life into their own hands, not waiting for favors from other nationalities, not being like the German Jews, being Germanim bnei dat Moshe, which means they're part of another nation, but they hold on to the Jews. We have to revive nationality, he said. We have to go back and to revive nationality. And he started to organize the Chibat Zion, Chovevei Zion, in 1884, Katowice, Vidat Katowice, he actually built up the first group that spoke about Jewish nationalism. And nationalism, according to Echad Ha'am, means not mere nationalism, but having continuing to carry with them the basic values of Judaism. Not necessarily all the mitzvot, all the Shulchan Aruch, which he didn't like at all, Echad Ha'am. He thought it suffocated the Jews. But taking with us the memory of the past, our glory of what the Jews did, our history and our values, and with that, start taking action. So Echad Ha'am and Pinsker was the chairman, they actually started the entire movement. They were the real revolutionaries of Zionism. They were opening the way by not only speaking about reviving Jewish nationalism, but actually building the first organization that gathered Jews and started speaking about Eretz Israel, going back to Eretz Israel. As I said, the ultra-Orthodox community opposed it. There was a feeling that what they said, Shelo Ya'alu B'choma, they said we should not try to organize. There were four individuals that wanted to go to Eretz Israel, and some went to Eretz Israel. Some ultra-Orthodox went to Eretz Israel. But they were absolutely against an organized effort to go and live in Eretz Israel. There were various reasons for it. They were afraid that the Goyim will be against it and the Jews will be suffered due to it. They were fearful that out of it will come, since the people who spoke about it were non-observant, mainly were national Jews, and so they were afraid that it will further damage the halakha living. But in my view, probably, they still remembered the 17th century Shabtai Tzvi. Shabtai Tzvi in the 17th century brought a havoc in the Jewish world. He was declared by Natan Hazati, I won't go into details, but he was declared the Messiah. And he changed the entire Jewish community, almost all over the world, believed in the message that he is a Messiah. And he started marching towards Eretz Israel with many followers. At the same time was also Khmelnytsky pogrom, which killed 100,000 Jews. So they wanted to go with him in order to save themselves from another pogroms and so on. And it turned out that Shabtai Tzvi was forced to become a Muslim, and many of his followers became Muslims, believing in some kind of a mishmash of Judaism, Muslim, and Islam. And at the time, very few rabbis dared to speak against this Messiah and so on. There was a movement, and definitely, probably the Rabbanim didn't want that such a case will reappear. In the 18th century, there was another fake Messiah called Jacob Frank, who ended up not in Islam, but in Catholicism, and with many of his followers went into Catholicism, and he sold them kind of an interesting mix between Judaism and Catholicism, but they were out of the Jewish people. So the rabbis were very much, they said, Asur la'alot b'choma, we shouldn't organize an aliyah to Eretz Israel, we shouldn't try to do it on their own. We have to wait for the mercy of Shamayim, Chazdei Shamayim. The Lord will send us a real Messiah, a messenger that will bring us out of the tzuras that we have in the Golah, of this horrible situation, and we will be brought to Eretz Israel for salvation. But we shouldn't move before we get the Lord is sending us the messenger to bring us home. So what we see is that due to a few individuals, actually, Zionism was born. And both Echad Ha'am and Pinsker were the first to do it, with some also religious Jews, because this issue of nationality had nothing to do with Haskalah. You can be a religious Jew, and some joined them, didn't listen to the ultra-Orthodox that were against it, and some Orthodox Jews went with Chibat Zion, and from there, later on, came the Mizrahi, Tnuat HaMizrahi, that became part of Zionism. Now, They were the forerunners. A few years later, a few years after the death of Pinsker, who organized them, and in this city of London, in 1896, about a year before the first Jewish Congress, appeared a person called Theodor Herzl. And there was, I believe it still is, a Maccabi club in London. And he said the following. The Jews, he said, want their own state, where they can finally live and prosper as free people. The state, he added, must belong to us according to the laws of the nations. The idea of the homeland was vital in order to finally guarantee the Jews that they will never again be persecuted for religious or nationalistic reasons. We have a right, Herzl said in London, at least as much as anyone else, to demand a country for our national existence. We have earned this right through our travels, for which there is no comparison in the history of mankind. A river of blood has accompanied us along our path of hundreds of years. And the worst was still to come. And he finished his speech, which, I always remember his words. He concluded his speech saying that the land of our fathers still exists. It has not sunk to the bottom of the sea. The ancient land still bears flowers. It again bears fruit. And it is possible that one day, one beautiful day, it will bear the happiness and honor of the Jews. And of course, the Jewish Chronicle of London said, responded to the speech and said that a fanciful speech, but totally impractical. And from there, actually, that was a continuation of this revolt against it was a revolt, one has to understand, a revolt against the destiny of the Jews, against exploding this acceptance of the problems, the fact that you have to live in a ghetto, that you have to lower your head in front of the Goyim. Here came two people, and Herzl came thereafter, and were actually real revolutionaries. The main aspect of Herzl's revolutionary message, which was developed after the people that I've mentioned, were in three dimensions. He viewed the Jews as a nation and a people. The return to Zion as a proactive national movement. And finally, the demand for political sovereignty and self-rule in the land of Israel. Now, it's very interesting to see the theory that Herzl built. He was, people don't really understand it, but he was a great strategist and not only a visionary. The first thing was that he organized a Jewish parliament and thereby immediately declared himself the representative of all the Jewish people. I don't know, when he sends the invitation, the story is that he was sitting in Basel with 20 students, sending the envelopes, inviting the people to the conference. He had no mandate, but he built it. He stood up. Now, the very saying that the Jews are not a religion, but they are a people, went together with the Chad Ha'am and Pinsker. And it was a very powerful message, a message that united religious and secular people, educated Jews from the main cities and the inhabitants of the shtetls, people who looked differently ethnically, spoke different languages, and represented totally diverse cultures. But they are the people, he said. Doesn't matter if you are religious or not. there is a place for everybody among this enormous, interesting revolutionary movement. But from the very beginning, he organized the group in a democratic culture, and immediately organized also practical ways in order to accomplish the goal. They built a bank, אוצר התיישבות היהודים, that was to collect money. Went too successful in that. They aimed to collect, 50,000 sterling. After he died, Nordau said that was the chairman of the organization that were not able to collect even half of it. But he was, since he declared himself as the head of the Jewish organization of all the Jews, he got the education. He was educated outside of the shtetl. He could implement his other very important approach of speaking about international diplomacy. He understood that in order to be able to move forward, he needs to get the support of the people, or the elements that will be running the international arena. It was immediately after the beginning of the 20th century. At that time already, from the 1880s, a little before, there was a move. The British were moving. In 1887, they conquered Cyprus, and in 1881 or 2, 83, I think, they went into Egypt. So they were moving there. And eventually, and he tried to speak with the Germans, he tried to speak with the Turks to buy the land, but he couldn't collect the money to buy the land. But he spoke with everybody and the British, and finally, basically, his policy of using international diplomacy paid off, because the Balfour Declaration that Reichman was able to bring was actually Balfour Declaration from this city was able to pave the way to eventually get the land. And it was declared in 1917, long after Herzl died. But what is interesting, and I'm speaking about it because here is the foundation of the State of Israel, which was the foundation that Herzl put on was something that in a second we'll see how it came to be exercised in the Jewish state. It is interesting to note that the Herzl Zionism was born in two cities, in France and in Vienna. Now, it was born in two ways. First, as we see in a second, he was heavily influenced by the theories that were prevalent at those times in Paris, and the openness, the national openness in Vienna. But at the same time, there were the two cities that persuaded Herzl that there is no place for Jews in those cities. That the ideas of nationalism, of liberal nationalism, have to be embraced, but we have to actually build our own country outside because there was no place for Jews. One has to remember that in Paris, he was a reporter for a Vienna paper, and he covers the Dreyfus trial, which persuaded him that, there's no place for Jews in France. And in Vienna at this time, there was this strange forerunner of Hitler, mayor, Lueger, who declared that Jews cannot be members of the municipality of Vienna. Jews cannot be employed by the municipality of Vienna, and there is no outsourcing to Jews from the municipality of Vienna. And Vienna was at the time, which it still is, but it's a state. It's a federal state within the Austria. So he was persuaded that he cannot do. But on the other hand, he took the ideas. One of the researchers of Herzl, Shlomo Avineri, claimed that Herzl based his ideological vision on the French revolutionary principles of liberty, equality, and fraternity. The element of fraternity was grounded in what was very known in France at that time, which was called the Third Way. It was a mix. On the one hand, Herzl believed that the Third Way in private initiative and competition, but at the same time he emphasized solidarity and mutual responsibility. A state that will control the land. We are suffering from it up to the present day with our land authority in Israel. Caring for the welfare of individuals throughout the various stages of his or her life. And he was very encouraging cooperative entrepreneurship from the poor people that were supposed to come to Israel at the time. The element of liberty was anchored in the conception of democratic normative society, a state that was neither a theocracy nor subordinate to the rabbis, but that preserved Jewish symbols and traditions. The element of equality was fascinating. Herzl enabled women to be part of the Jewish Congress, and was perhaps the first, definitely in Europe, that allowed women to vote. And in his writing, he said women should be treated equal, which was really out of the time. There is a beautiful part in, which we'll come back to in a moment, a beautiful part in his novel of Alt-Neuland, in which he, it's a horrible, it's a boring book, but it's the most important book, that in our history, I think, this Roman. And in his book, he describes the elections first elections in the Jewish state. He imagines the Jewish state and he describes the first election. And in the election, suddenly appears a rabbi that was against Zionism. But there was election, he was running for election, he came there. And he ran a campaign not allowing an Arab to be part of the Jewish community of this Jewish state, so to speak. And what is interesting there is a debate between the two camps, and of course, he is defeated, this rabbi is defeated and leaving, nobody knows where he is leaving the country after he's defeated, and hereby Herzl is claiming, as Echad Ha'am, by the way, are claiming that Arabs and other people can and should be part of the Jewish state, of the new society that is created. He believes in equality under the law. Now, I can speak a lot about his ideas. He saw the Jewish state being very among the exalted nations. He, for example, was in his Alt-Neuland, there is a moment that he speaks about the invention of the trains And he makes it a National Remembrance Day, to pay tribute to science. And he believes in a country with a cutting edge of scientific and technological advancement. All is coming true. And he has a beautiful part in his description of Jerusalem, of the Jewish state. He believes that in the middle of the old city, there is a beautiful large building in which scientists from the entire world are coming, and others and leaders, in order to speak and try to bring international peace. So actually, Herzl spoke about it before the League of Nations and before the United Nations, and definitely it was the inspiration of Isaiah that brought that idea to him. And I personally believe that the International Court should be in Jerusalem, not only because of Herzl, but because Isaiah believed that there will be no wars, no bloodshed, provided everybody would adjudicate before the Lord in the hills of Jerusalem. By the way, it's also beautiful to mention that Herzl in one point says, now as we Jews got our independence and freedom, we should work to enable the blacks in Africa to accomplish the same. It's the beginning of the 20th century. What is beautiful, and here I finish in what Herzl said, that Zionism is an infinite ideal that will always aspire towards moral perfection. And that is exactly what Ben-Gurion is picking up. Ben-Gurion is continuing, and Jabotinsky, both continued to follow Herzl's way. Ben-Gurion is speaking about the enormous difficulties he's facing in the beginning of the country. The ingathering of exiles, it's a huge thing, never happened in Jewish history. The liberation of the lands, because only 10% of the country was occupied or loose. And then he had the security problem that Ben-Gurion says that this problem would scare even the heart of a lion. It was really a difficult situation. Anyways, but then he says, Ben-Gurion, the state of Israel will be tested, notwithstanding all these major issues. The state of Israel will be tested not by its wealth, nor by its military or technology, but by its moral character and human values. And he's speaking about of course, the prophets and Afta l'reacha kamocha and so on. And then he says that insofar as religion, that he's inspired, he says something which became the motto of the first people in Israel. He says, the past, insofar as religion, the past belongs to us. We do not belong to the past. So we can, out of the Jewish tradition, what we understand, what is important, but we are not dominated by the past, by the mitzvot of the Jewish heritage. We must to show the world a new path, a path of peace and justice and liberty and human brotherhood, not by preaching and explaining, but by being exemplary in our lives, in our regime, and in our behavior, as the state of Israel should be a model society. That was Zionism. Now, I bring you back to the subject. It reminds me this famous story of a lecturer that came to a kibbutz and said, before I start my lecture, I want to say a few words. He's speaking 1 hour, and then said, now I start my lecture. So I don't know. It will take 2 hours more. Well, following the United Nations resolution that recognized the Jewish state, the Arabs, as you know, declared the holy jihad to annihilate the Zionist entity. While being engaged in the battle and in the knowledge that the next day the 7 Arab armies will storm the 600,000 Jews living in Israel at the time. On the 14th of May, 1948, the Declaration of Independence of the State of Israel came into effect. The Declaration of Independence is a national credo that accompanied the fighters of the fiercest and most brutal war in the history of the state. Had we been defeated, it would likely have been the end of the Jewish people. After the Holocaust, this was indeed the last battle. The Declaration of Independence is not simply a statement conveying a war of liberation. The Declaration of Independence is, in my view, the second most important document in the history of the Jewish people after the Ten Commandments. The similar situation, the cast of the Jewish slaves in Egypt was organized by Moses, who led them to rebel against the fate and guided them on the journey to the land of the forefathers. The Zionist revolution led by Herzl accomplished something unbelievable and unprecedented in the annals of history, when it brought a fragmented and persecuted nation who has suffered much bloodshed throughout 1,800 years in exile, back to its historic homeland. Among the Jews who left Egypt, there were, of course, people who wanted to go back, and the same happened with the ultra-Orthodox who didn't want to move forward, and perhaps if they would have joined, there would be less people killed in the Shoah. The Declaration of Independence, and here's the point that I wanted to make, expresses the values of Zionism, the movement that was actually born out this tremendous leadership and innovation of a few people that actually changed the history of the people. It was the Declaration of Independence is actually is embracing those ideas. The essence of Judaism was those who drafted the declaration was national identity, devotion to the land of Israel, the Hebrew language, the preservation of ethnic distinctiveness, humanistic values, and traditions related to the land. The concept of the Jews as a nation, lay at the root of the national activism that produced this great revolution in human history, enabling the building of the land and building the country. The Declaration of Independence expresses the fulfillment of the generation's old desire to be Am Chofshi B'Artzenu, to be a free people in our homeland, while guaranteeing a life of liberty and equality for all. The Declaration of Independence reflects the aspiration to be a moral, exemplary society, as you saw from Ben-Gurion also, committed to the basic principles it outlines, and I read them. The State of Israel will be open to Jewish immigration and for the ingathering of exiles. It will foster the development of the country for the benefit of all its inhabitants. It will be based on freedom, justice, and peace, as envisioned by the prophets of Israel. It will ensure complete equality of social and political rights to all its inhabitants, irrespective of religion, race, or sex. It will guarantee freedom of religion, conscience, language, education, and culture. It will safeguard the holy places of all religions. The declaration that founded the Jewish state includes the basic values of the state. It was signed by all the representatives, by the representative of all political parties, all different views. And the declaration was seen as having a constitutive validity beyond any law, and a total part of the establishment of the State of Israel. In my childhood, I remember the Declaration of Independence appearing in every school, in every place. I saw all my life my loyalty to the State of Israel was in accordance with the Declaration of Independence. And when I built IDC, you didn't see the right movie. When I built IDC, I declared IDC is the only university in the world. I declared this is a Zionist university in accordance with the Declaration of Independence. And people attacked me, what nationality has to do with academia. I said, no, that's the only reason why I built the IDC, in order to educate the future leadership of Israel. Now, one has to understand that the resilience of a state requires a framework of agreed upon basic values as a precondition for the kind of national unity that can stand firm even in the face of disagreements. And the only one that we have, such a declaration, is the Declaration of Independence. A declaration that is pushed aside and is losing its importance due to surrender of the government of today to an agreement with the ultra-Orthodox parties. What happened was that people in the right wing of the Knesset came with an idea of having a national law. Once declared that Israel is a national of the Jewish people, and nobody else has a right to claim anything about according to this law, is the exercise of the right of national self-determination in the state of Israel is unique to the Jewish people. Okay, I don't have much argument with that, although the idea was that if you declare the annexing parts to Israel, it's unique only to the Jewish people once you annex it, and maybe you can deprive the Arabs citizens of right to vote or whatever, but you can get along. The rest of this, that is the key of the national law, and then it goes over mainly to give the power of a basic law to certain things that appear anyways in our laws, the holidays, the emblem, the flag, the Tikva, and many other things, Jerusalem, something that is, most of it is either part of our life, or it's anyways already in regular laws. What is interesting, that those who came up with this basic law, the basic law that the national Israel is a national Jewish state, as it's called. It's called, the name of this is Israel, the nation state of the Jewish people. All of them, all the proposals of this declaration, of this law, included in the proposal reference to the Declaration of Independence. They said, we preserve the declaration, the basic values of the Declaration of Independence. This law, for the time when the bills were proposed, looked as if it is strengthening the Declaration of Independence, because the Declaration of Independence were embodied in this law. And then what happened? Immediately, the legislation itself came very quickly, and we came out of it, and there was no mentioning of the Declaration of Independence. Joke, it was out. And the reason was very simple. Mr. Netanyahu wanted to show that his side of the political map are the real patriots. But he couldn't, but instead of, when you are working of a national law, you should try to have everybody, whoever feels Zionist, to be part of this national law. But he wanted to be alone, to push aside the opposition. But he couldn't do it without the ultra-Orthodox parties. So he bargained with them. And they said, take out the Declaration of Independence, and we will support your national law, which he did. Now, what happened? What happened that certain elements that, are dealing, as I said, with the flag and the hymn and science and so on and so forth, things that are not value-driven, basically, appear in the law. But the basic values from this paragraph that I read to you, they're speaking about equality. There's no discrimination. About having equality and representation of everybody in the country, of having pluralism in religion, and the right to be free of religion. All of it disappeared. Now, what happened? Yeah, the Declaration of Independence still appears somewhere. But since it never got the power, it was assumed that this is what unites us as Israelis, those basic values. And as I tried to show you, they are derived from the very revolution of Zionism. It came down from Pinsker and from Echad Ha'am, via Herzl and Ben-Gurion and Jabotinsky. All those values disappear, become not important, because we have now a definition of the national state of the Jewish people, which doesn't mention it. And whoever is a lawyer knows that if you have a bill that mentions something and then it is thrown aside, it has a meaning. And the meaning is they took away the basic value, the basic declaration, they put aside, and it became a museum piece only, the Declaration of Independence. If they would have left the reference to the Declaration of Independence, the courts could intervene and impose and make people abide by those rules. Of course, this fact brought a lot of controversy in Israel. The Druze that are fighting with us, our brothers in war, said suddenly, we are out. No equality. Arabs. Not every Arab is an enemy. And I showed you that the idea of Zionism was to live together. Why do you want to push them? To where you want to push them? And women. According to the religion, there's no equality, at least to the ultra-Orthodox. So the ultra-Orthodox won a great victory. Of course, it didn't make the Israel Medinat Halacha, but they resented the Declaration of Independence from the very beginning, because the state of Israel didn't declare the halachic law will be the law of the land. because the name of the Almighty didn't appear in our Declaration of Independence, because there was equality, especially for men and women, all of it, that was part and parcel of Zionism. The chalutzim and chalutzot work together. All of it disappeared. Now the problem is that that was the beginning of a development that, in my view, jeopardizes the very basic ideas. Here we have starting to see a kind of a counter-revolution. You have to know that according to the ultra-Orthodox view, there is no tolerance, and there is no compromise, ideological compromise. It's not, we believe that everybody can live as he or she wants, and there is pluralism in a society, so I don't believe in it. According to, I drafted, among other mischiefs I did in my life, in 1986, since in our Declaration of Independence was provided that no later than October 1st, 1948, there will be a constitution for the State of Israel. It never happened. We have only a few basic laws. So I called a few professors and drafted a proposal for a constitution. And I fought for it, and I was able to push a partial Bill of Rights and change the system of election at the time, although they ruined it, direct election of the prime minister. If we had this law, probably we didn't have this 3 rounds. But a member of our faculty, who was an ultra-Orthodox, a great guy, wonderful person, perished, wrote an article against the proposal of the Constitution, and he explained openly that there is no pluralism according to religion. There is only one truth. And actually, it's also the duty of the ultra-Orthodox to try to make all the Jews, believe in that truth. But he said, there is an ability we believe in a narrow definition of democracy. The narrow definition of democracy is that the will of the majority in the Knesset can do things that in the open society it won't be exactly to the desires of the ultra-Orthodox, but they accept it because that's the only thing that they would accept, not to force them to act against religion, but that will be the only thing that they will accept, because the alternative is chaos. Must be some order in society. Which means, for them, the most important thing is only, that is for them the definition of democracy. Now, recently, this definition of democracy appears in Israel. We all know that there is no democracy that allows just the decision of a majority. What about the protection of minorities? What about violation of basic human rights? And in Israel, surprise, surprise, you need the protection, the majority needs the protection against the minority, because the Knesset doesn't decide anything. It's the government that is deciding and forcing the legislation in the Knesset. And who is the most influential in the government? The ultra-Orthodox. So the majority needs protection in front of the law against those rules. And when you hear Israelis speaking today, the government people, they say democracy is the rule of the majority in the Knesset. And the court has no right to overrule decisions, laws. And as a matter of fact, the new Minister of Justice is saying that if there is a decision that we don't like, or maybe too extreme, we just can ignore it. Now there are modern examples of the same theory. Go to Turkey, go to Hungary, and go to Poland. The same argument is argued there. And in Poland, of course, they are against the courts, the constitutional courts that stand up against the so-called will of the people. In Turkey, they dismissed the court, the constitutional court. In Poland, they decided to lower the age of retirement and fired all the judges. But then there was an uproar, also, put against the uproar. And I can only remind you that this is exactly what is happening in dictatorship. Hitler passed laws according to the will of the parliament. He won the election in a democratic way. We all learned that you cannot be something, the will of the people by the majority, a small majority or another majority in the Knesset. There are certain safeguards which are part and parcel of the belief that is expressed in our Declaration of Independence. And there are other things that develop. Like in the three countries that I've mentioned, it's clearly that everybody has to abide by the will of the majority. So what is happening if those who safeguard the law, be it the police or be it the attorneys, the prosecutors, or the Attorney General, after learning a case for a long period of time, decide that the Prime Minister, as other Prime Ministers, other people, major people, our President, former Prime Minister, our Chief Rabbi, violated the law. And say, well, he has to stand justice. There is a campaign saying that all of them are simply looking to dismiss the Prime Minister of the country, that what they couldn't do in elections, they are trying to do it. And the Prime Minister is standing up and saying, well, you have to investigate the investigators. Something is foul here. So you work against the principles of the laws and so on. You deprive Arabs and you deprive Druze and others from equality. And you don't have safeguards. Now, it's not my way to criticize Israel abroad. But here it's a point that I cannot stay dormant. I speak out in the country about it. And I think that what is happening is turning the back on a revolution. The most important revolution in recent history of the Jewish people. And that is only the beginning. What is happening is your chief rabbi in Reichman, Jonathan Sachs, wrote in a beautiful book, Not in God's Name. He explained that in this time and era, fundamentalist ideas surface due to a host of reasons. Because people are isolated. They are sitting with their computers and so on. And computer is no replacement. You heard the professor that is speaking about oxytocin. In that we need a touch, we need a hug, we need an eye contact, because we are, and it has an impact on our brain. So people are isolated. People are fearful with all the technological revolution. Not everybody is coming to study at IDC. And what is happening with the narrowcasting? We had in the past broadcasting. Broadcasting is radio, television. It's open to everybody. If you lie, you may face a court procedure. You have to cater to a large public. Now we have the narrowcasting. You can direct yourself to a small group and tell them that they are part of a major war, of the son of lights against the sons of darkness. And you can create greater extremes. And you see it in radical groupings and also in radical religion groups. And we have recently a new messianic group in Israel, people who believe that Zionism wasn't doing of the heroes that I've mentioned. It was the hand of the Lord. And Zionism itself, should be out. And what we need is לחזור, all of us has to לחזור בתשובה, and then the Messiah will come. Which, I'm very grateful that I am what we call in Hebrew, חמורו של משיח, that what we did, we were just carrying without volunteering, without dead, fighting, and so on. We just were serving the coming of the Messiah, and so on. I'm going around the country, and I'm saying, the Israeli people, don't vote for any political party that is not making a declaration that they will pass the next Knesset after the election a law with one sentence. The Declaration of Independence of Hei B'Iyar Tashach is a basic law. Thank you very much.
Professor Reichman, thank you on behalf of everybody. I'm reeling. You have educated us, of course, as is befitting tonight, with a focus and also a scale that is hugely impressive. And you have posed us with some very challenging ideas. And I know that we'll all be thinking hard about them, and I would encourage everybody to continue the conversation. In the spirit of learning, I'm happy to take your corrections. I still think it's impressive to have served 26 years as a president, even if you didn't kick yourself off. And I apologize that we showed the wrong video, but I found myself reflecting also on the oxytocin that you spoke about, the attachment hormone, about this extraordinary attachment between people and book and land, and the interplay of those. So again, thank you very much. I'd like to thank Judy Trotter, JW3's Head of Adult Education and Learning, for all her hard work on creating and producing tonight's event. And I have a couple of surprises that even Robin and Nitza don't know about. I would now like to call up Robin and Nitza's daughter, Ayala, and their grandson, Daniel, to say a few words.
Thank you very much. So, good evening, everybody. If you don't know me, I'm one of the many Spiro children, and there are lots. And strangely, my family thought that because I occasionally present at conferences, that I would be the best person to speak this evening. But they fail to recognise that in my field of nutrition science, I usually have a good set of PowerPoint slides based on evidence to rely on, rather than my heart on this occasion. But nonetheless, it's a real honour for me to have this opportunity to recognise and celebrate the work of my parents, particularly at this time. By this time, Robin turns 89 on Sunday. And to announce that, in this, his 90th year, the Spiro Ark, the charity established by Robin and his beautiful wife Nitsa, renowned for their pioneering work in Jewish education, will be closing at the end of this academic year. So why do I say celebrate then? Because let's think of this announcement in a really positive way, as a birth and not a funeral. And let me share with you why. As you have heard, for the past 4 decades, the name Spiro has been synonymous with new approaches to Jewish education. From enriching the very young through to adults of all ages, their drive has been not to accept the widespread loss of Jewish identity among the majority as irreversible, but rather to realise that the long and incredible history and rich culture of the Jewish people makes Jewish survival an inspirational topic for so many, and both to Jews and non-Jews. Their innovative thinking appreciated the importance of the rich tapestry of Judaism in a much wider context, that the study of Jewish culture, history and language not only has an intrinsic fascination in its own right, but could play a fundamental role in maintaining a Jewish sense of identity. Moreover, that such learning could play a crucial part in breaking many anti-Jewish prejudices, so important in a world where anti-Semitism is increasing. Through their charity, Robin and Nitsa, my parents, have tirelessly demonstrated that by bringing people together in appreciation of Jewish culture, by sharing language and history, communities could draw on and learn from the Jewish experience and build far more on what unites us in humanity. My parents have been leaders in developing multifaceted programs to promote and inspire Jewish identity through so many original and often very groundbreaking routes. From their very early days of working with schools, if we remember, introducing the Modern Jewish History AO level, backed by the then Greater London Council for its valuable contribution to race relations, with the Open University and the BBC on the first ever multimedia course to be produced in English in any part of the world, with the first ever Jewish and Israeli film festivals, with introducing Jewish music and theatre from all corners of the world to new audiences, and to visits nationally and internationally to the discovery of hidden places of Jewish interest. Of course, this enormous growth does not happen with the tremendous warm and generous support of a large number of people, including a team of staff and volunteers over the years. Many supporters and friends are here indeed tonight, and so an enormous and very heartfelt thank you to you all. And it's interesting that with such programmes now taking place throughout the country, we may forget that when Nitsa and Robin started their journey, these events were rare, and their importance and relevance even doubted. Yet today, we have a thriving, diverse offering of Jewish arts, culture, language and community. Look at where we are in JW3, for example. But this could almost certainly not have happened without the Spiro's work, both through the Spiro Institute and through the Spiro Ark. And in reality, the Spiro Ark can reach a point of closure because of its success rather than its failure. From a small seed, a forest of Jewish culture has grown around us. So although the Spiro Ark will cease, we should celebrate Robin and Nitsa for being instrumental in the recognition of the vital role Jewish education, history and culture can play in maintaining a Jewish sense of identity to practicing and non-practicing Jews, and how sharing this with so many others can engender a greater understanding and appreciation of Judaism as a faith and the Jews as a people. And as, of course, age is just a number, Nitsa will continue with her award-winning teaching, as well as still being involved in certain significant events that will most certainly benefit from her deep experience, her wisdom, her vision, and her insight. If you allow me now for the last few minutes to reflect a little more personally on this inspirational pair and the legacy they leave. So, I would like to start by telling you about a story that I think is a microcosm of what the Spiro arc does more widely. As I said at the start, I work in nutrition, maybe inspired by the composition and significance of bowls of chicken soup. So I was delighted to welcome my parents to my workplace to share with my team their considerable insight into the significance of food in the Passover Seder. My colleague's son attended, Ollie, perhaps he was 9 or 10 at the time. He joined us and listened wide-eyed at their stories. And of course, because he was the youngest there, he was given the role of asking the 4 questions. Now, this is a young Jewish boy with absolutely no Jewish connections. Yet 2 years later, he is now at secondary school. His project about buildings this year focused on synagogues. And where he entered the district school cooking competition, he entered a Friday night traditional meal. He has developed a hunger, excuse the pun, for knowledge and for understanding more about Judaism. Nitsa opened his eyes to a Jewish world and gave him the confidence and curiosity to ask questions. And I think this is what the Spiro arc has done on a larger scale. It's given us the curiosity and the confidence to explore what Judaism is for us and what makes it special. In fact, when I think what it is to be Jewish for me, I just look at my parents, who absolutely embody some of the key values which have been passed down. They connect us to our past and connect us to our future, and thus these Spiro values will continue generationally. And let me share a little bit about how I feel this is reflected in our own family. Undoubtedly, there is a religious aspect, and I look to my brother-in-law Isaac, who can be found sharing in fascination with our parents the interpretation and language in biblical texts when he so generously welcomes us all into his home on Shabbat. But they have also passed on some much wider intrinsic values: hard work, determination, courage, and resilience. Reflected perhaps in my brother Donny's commitment to and his great skill at boxing. What else, after all, really typifies being knocked down and rising back up again? I look at my sister Yanni, a therapist, with her empathy and deep understanding of human nature that links in with the emotionally astute cultural heritage that binds us as Jews. I look at the extraordinary creativity of our sister Minky, successfully directing in LA, with her talent for rich and deep and dynamic storytelling. And let's talk about the values that we were shared earlier, about respect, about freedom, about equality and striving for justice, that my sister, Judge Daphna, embodies every day in her work, as do our other family members in the legal profession, like Beth, Dolly's partner, like Bill, Daphna's husband, and more recently, our lovely niece, Sunny. And I really can't finish this personal reflection without mentioning our wonderful sister, Edith, who's over from Israel today. A recent experience that I'll share with you. In Greece a few months ago, Edith was running a Pilates retreat. Every morning, I try to get my healthy breakfast quickly. See, I take nutrition very seriously. But was always inundated by an array of people wanting to share with me what an impact Edith and her teaching had had on their lives. This is an absolute mirror of what people say about Nitsa, and extraordinarily what her said about her mother, Savta Hanka, too. All of them amazing teachers. So please let's remind ourselves, in the day of celebrity influencers that may influence us for 2 minutes, that the influence of good teachers stays with us. That these are the people who really shape our lives. And because greatness and legacy is obtained by handing our values onto the next generation and empowering them to go and build the future, I want to reflect on how eloquently Nietzsche's grandchildren, Jacob and Lola, at their respective bar and bat mitzvahs, shared the stories and the thoughts on their relatives that as children did not survive the Holocaust. As we have just commemorated the 75th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz, this is so poignant and important. The recounting of their stories by a new generation, so that no one ever forgets. Well, I hope in a small way I have shown how we as a family, generating from this extraordinary couple, have found a real unique sense of our own identity. And I'm sure, like us, the lives of many of you in this room today may have been in some way shaped, as Jews and as people, by the work of Robin and Nietzsche and by their work at the Spiro Arc. Before I end, a little audience participation, of course. And testing any Hebrew students here, does anybody know what the name Nietzsche means? For me, I think it means a bud, but it might. And when we think about the bud, we think of the legacy that the Spiro Arc leaves us with a bud that can open and blossom. But like all plants, it needs strong and nourishing roots. And we must thank the tireless and brilliant work of Nietzsche and Robin for providing these roots for us. So I thank them enormously, and now call upon another fantastic member of our family, Daniel, to give some more thanks. Thank you all very much.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Daniel Raffaelli, and I am one of Nietzsche and Robin's 16 grandchildren. Isaac Newton once said, "If I have seen further than others, it is only by standing upon the shoulders of giants." Isaac Newton attributes his success to the support and contribution of others. And equally, the Spiro Arc's success lies with everyone who has supported them along the way. Now, when my grandparents asked me to say a few words of gratitude on their behalf, for fear of their emotions inevitably getting the better of them, I was honored to do so. Saba, Safta, I hope I can do this in a way that conveys the deep gratitude that I know you have for the many that have been with you on your remarkable journey. So the first thanks I want to give is to Professor Uriel Reichman for accepting the invitation to honor this occasion despite the endless demands on your time. I think we can all agree we've been enriched by this evening and by your educational vision. As my grandmother has spent the majority of her life teaching Hebrew, there are two Hebrew words that stand out. The first one is one of the most important words in Jewish heritage, and that is liskol, meaning to remember. In this regard, a huge thank you must go to the Pears Foundation. So the Pears Foundation year on year support Nietzsche and Robin's work and continue to celebrate their achievements with an annual tribute. This ensures that their work and legacy will never be forgotten. To the many students of different creeds and political spectrums, thank you. To the participants in their array of cultural offerings, and to those who took the torch, ignited the fire, and spread the sparks far and wide, thank you. Their gratitude also extends to the academics, authors, artists, rabbis, religious and secular Jewish organizations, members of non-Jewish establishments, and members of the media who over the decades have assisted them in spreading their educational mission to strengthen Jewish identity far and wide. Thank you also to the embassies and cultural centers of many countries who entrusted the Spiro Arc to devise for and with them important programs. Thank you to the British Foreign Office, who placed their trust in Nietzsche to prepare ambassadors and political attachés for their missions in our embassy in Israel. Nietzsche and Robin would also like to thank all of their assistants throughout the years for being true partners rather than just mere employees. But a special mention must go to the very talented and loyal Vanya. A big thank you must also go to the many friends who assisted them from faraway countries, many of whom are with us this evening, with a special mention to Amnon and Malka Leon. And let us not forget JW3, especially to the wonderful Raymond Simonson and Judy Trotter. And lastly, but perhaps most importantly, the family. Nitsa wants to personally thank her beloved husband, my grandfather, Robin Spiro. Robin brought Nitsa here to England 52 years ago. Initially apprehensive and fearing that she'd feel alienated in a foreign country, Nitsa agreed to stay for a few years with the intention of eventually returning to Israel. However, thanks to Robin abducting Nitsa, they soon discovered many wonderful individuals and groups who enriched their lives and enabled them to develop their passion for Jewish culture. Then, of course, there are the 8 children and 16 grandchildren who have all absorbed their values and who excel both as human beings and as professionals. They are immensely proud of every single one, but a special mention has to go to Diti and her family, and Nitsa's brother Yossi, who have flown from Israel for this occasion today. Nitsa would also like to thank her parents, Chana and Kuba Lieberman, who instilled in her the importance of having a mission in life and having the courage to pursue it no matter what the obstacles. Now, the Spiro Arc is sadly closing its gates at the end of this academic year. But its light will continue to shine brightly for many years to come, and my grandparents' spirit will never be forgotten. I would like to end this evening with the second Hebrew phrase, Mikol melamdai hiskalti, which means, I learned from everyone that I have come across. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the essence of my grandparents' journey. To all of you who enriched their lives and have taught them something special of your own along the way, a very big toda rabah and thank you.
Friends, I mentioned at the start of this evening that Robin is about to enter his 90th year. We couldn't let this evening end without celebrating this wonderful milestone. So, can I ask you all to please join me in a rousing rendition of Happy Birthday? We have a cake. May I ask you, as a standing ovation to this extraordinary couple, I think we all stand on the shoulders of Spiros, to stand and to join me as we sing, Happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you, happy birthday, dear Robin, happy birthday to you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. That concludes the lecture in here. We'll endeavour to cut as many pieces of cake as we can. Good evening.
It is my great, great honor to come to this beautiful, beautiful event for original, highly, highly original and creative couple, Nitsa and Robin Spiro.
About Spiros?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Toda. It was an honor for me to join the Spiros this evening. I didn't know that that is a final accord in the wonderful journey of being devoted to a culture and to a people. Being myself an academic entrepreneur, I can see and understand how difficult the journey was, doing it on their own. Many, I'm sure, moments of lonely despair. And to stand up and to continue with the commitment all those years is something that should be an example to many of us. But they accomplished something that very few of us will accomplish, is being entrenched in the life of so many people that passed through their education over the 40 years. So I wish them luck, and I'm very happy that I was able to join them this evening.
Hi, this is Tejas Mistry. I met Robin and Nitsa about 4 or 5 years ago. It's been an amazing honor and a pleasure to have known them, just to learn what they give of themselves to the community, to the Jewish culture and the values they extol. There's a lot here that we can all learn from them, and I hope we continue doing all the things that they've started, regardless of age, religion, class, creed. I think their values extend to everyone in the world. Thank you very much, Robin and Nitsa, for everything that you've done as people. You're a real beacon of hope for everyone who know you and who don't. Thank you very much.
It's to do what? Can you move round the corner and then you won't tricking up so much?
It's Lechem.
That's Lechem.
Right.
רובין וניצה, אני אוהבת את שניהם. That's it.
Where we are?
Yeah. Stop it. Love you, Robin and Nitsa.
No, but somebody has
Working with Robin and Nitsa.
Okay. Because I was
Because they are inspiring, because I learn a bit of Hebrew with them, not much. אני לא מעבדר עברית, I think. Anyway, I think I'll find someone else now. Do you want to?
Say whatever you want.
Hello, my name is Maurice Hoffman, and I've been the photographer.
Just underneath.
And there, I'll start again. Hello there, my name is Maurice Hoffman, and I've been the photographer for Spiro events for the last 2 or 3 years, and I'm absolutely amazed about the breadth and inspiration of the events that the Spiros have put on, and how many, many people have really enjoyed and learnt about Judaism, the Jewish world, and Jewish culture.
Okay. Yeah, about the speech and Spiro.
Hi, I just wanted to say I've just been at the 6th annual tribute to the Spiro Arc, And I just wanted to say my thanks to Nitsa and Robin for providing a massive contribution to Jewish community life and cultural life in this country for many years now, running a great load of programs and courses, and they've been fantastic. So I'm honoured to be here. And I'd also like to say what a fantastic event to attend. It was an inspirational lecture, and I learned a hell of a lot, and I really want to say thank you, say I've enjoyed it, and it's a tribute to both of them. Thank you.
Okay, the word Spiro to me sounds very similar to inspiring, and that's exactly what this couple have been, and their teaching and everything they've done. They've done wonders for Jewish culture in the UK, and much, much to be admired, and I can only say I'm very sorry that they are ending, but it's understandable. Kol hakavod for everything that they've done.
A wise man once said, "The function of a teacher is to connect the pupil to the love of the subject." And I can think of no better teacher in my lifelong education as a doctor, as a psychotherapist, as a writer, than Nitsa Spiro. Her eyes sparkle, she loves teaching, she loves seeing pupils learn, and I've been one of those for a long time. I attend her Friday afternoon course on Tanakh in Hebrew, and I wouldn't miss that class for anything. So thank you, a massive thank you to Nitsa and Robin and the whole family for what you've contributed to this society.